Hello everyone and good evening, and welcome to the launch of the Modern Poetry in Translation spring issue, which is called Clean Hands, Focus on the Pandemic in Europe. And I would like to express particular thanks, as always, to Arts Council England, to the Stanza Festival, who collaborated with us on a brilliant window swap project in this issue, where poets responded to the views out of each other's windows during lockdown. And also particularly to the European Cultural Foundation, who supported this issue financially, as well as a whole series of digital stuff around it. It's all about encouraging links between poets across Europe. And that's something that means a lot to us here at Modern Poetry in Translation in these post-Brexit months. We've also just launched a new online workshop, also funded by them, which is to translate a pandemic poem by the Hungarian poet Anna T. Szabo. So do look online and have a go at that. And there's a podcast coming, and they've also funded this year's Translator in Residence, which there'll be an exciting announcement about soon. So many, many thanks to the European Cultural Foundation. A little bit of housekeeping. This Zoom webinar format is new to us. Some of you might have joined us on YouTube before, so just to apologise in advance if there's any glitches or you have trouble getting on and off or chatting or whatever. Hopefully it'll all work out. I'm sure our digital editor Ed would love your feedback afterwards. This should be captioned, and I believe there's a button that should be quite obvious, it's quite visible. You can press if you want live captioning, but it's done by AI. And just to let you know, non-English languages we're finding come out quite strange. So apologies for that in advance. Again, we're trialing a new technology, so apologies if it's a bit glitchy. But if you've got any questions about the captioning, do ask Ed in the chat. At the end, there'll be a chance for questions. So if you've got any as we go along, again, stick them in the chat. And we'll try and find those. I might also ask some questions myself if we've got time from our great guests tonight. To kick off the pandemic focus, apologies in advance, everyone, for if you've not read it yet, for my gloomy editorial, but we put this together at really the kind of nadir of the pandemic in the UK. Well, I hope it was during the winter lockdown when COVID obviously hit the UK extremely severely. But in London, it feels we're kind of coming out of that slightly now, and there's optimism in the air again. But I realise that might not be the same for all our readers and viewers elsewhere in the world. So our thoughts with some of you at the moment, and I hope this issue might offer, if not comfort, at least some kind of sense of connection and of solidarity. One of the only things that got me through lockdown actually was taking up making cocktails as a hobby. So this is one of my lockdown cocktails. I perfected the margarita. So cheers. There's all sorts of great stuff in this issue. The beautiful cover, which you can also see behind me, and I've matched my frock to, is by the Italian illustrator Elena Beretta. It's beautiful. You've got gold inside. As ever, it's a lovely looking thing. And we've got some really major European poets in here, from kind of Jan Wagner to Yanis Ritsos, translations of his house arrest poems by David Harson, which I think really speak to the moment. We've also got in the general submission section at the front, not related directly to the pandemic, a feature on Uyghur poetry, which I'm very honoured we were able to give a platform to, and I think there's some very important poems in there. The issue also includes some of the wonderful guests we've got tonight, who are going to read poems and translations and talk about the pandemic in Europe. So our guests are, in order of appearance, I suppose, Safiye Can, Martin Kratz, David Constantine, Simone Atangana Bekono, and David Colmer. And I'm going to introduce each of them each pair or individual reader as they come up, and they'll read for kind of 10 to 15 minutes, and then there'll be some time for questions at the end. So without further ado, the poets you've come to see. So I'll introduce the first pair. Safiye Can is a prize-winning poet, author and literary translator from Germany who has published best-selling collections of poetry and translates from Turkish into German as well. She's also a translator. And she's here with her translator tonight, Martin Kratz, whose most recent translations from the German have appeared in The Heart of a Stranger, an anthology of exile literature, which is a beautiful anthology that came out last year, I think. And he's project manager at the Manchester Poetry Library. So a very warm welcome to Safiye and Martin. If you could unmute yourselves, and really looking forward to hearing you read.
Du bist noch gemutet. You're still muted, Safiye.
Okay, I start again. Thank you so much, Claire, for the organization to this reading. I'm really happy to be with you all, with the translators, the poets. Many greetings from Germany. And it's a big thing that I can read for the English-speaking people. Thank you so much. So, Martin, we can start. Liebe zur Quarantänezeit. Jetzt sitzt du in Wien und ich in Offenbach und wir können nicht zueinander fliegen oder fahren mit dem Zug. Selbst die letzte aller Möglichkeiten, die 15-Stunden-Fahrt mit dem Flixbus ist nicht mehr möglich. Und dass ich dir am Frankfurter Hauptbahnhof glücklich zuwinke und dass du mich am Wiener Flughafen sehnsüchtig erwartest. Die Grenzen sind zu für alle Liebenden, mein Liebster. Jedes Umarmen bleibt verboten und wir dürfen nicht zueinander finden, was selbstverständlich sehr schade wäre, wenn wir uns nicht vorher schon getrennt hätten. Welch ein Glück.
Love in Lockdown 1. You're in Vienna and I'm in Offenbach, and we can't fly to be with one another or take the train. Even the 15-hour drive on the megabus, the only other possibility, is no longer possible. Or that I happily wave at you at Frankfurt Central Station, or that you hold me longingly at the airport in Vienna. The borders are closed to all lovers, my love, our holding each other forbidden, and we can't find our way to one another. Which would be a great pity, of course, if we hadn't already separated. How fortunate.
Liebe zur Quarantänezeit 2. Jetzt sitzt du in Düsseldorf und ich in Offenbach und wir können nicht zueinander fahren mit dem Auto oder Zug. Selbst die längste aller Möglichkeiten, die Propheten-Geduldsfahrt mit dem Flixbus, ist nicht mehr möglich. Und dass ich dir Ecke Schiller Schule in die Arme laufe und dass du mich am Düsseldorfer Hauptbahnhof sehnlichst erwartest. Die Grenzen sind zu für die Liebe, mein Liebster. Jedes Umarmen bleibt verboten und ich darf nicht zu dir finden. Nicht, weil die Welt dieser Tage von der Pandemie betroffen ist oder der Mindestabstand 2 Meter, sondern weil du mich auch ganz ohne Pandemie und Quarantäne einfach nicht willst. Welch ein Unglück.
Love in Lockdown 2. You're in Düsseldorf and I'm in Offenbach, and we can't visit one another by car or train. Even the trial by megabus, the longest of all possibilities, is no longer a possibility. Or that I run into your arms at the corner of the old school, or that you await me eagerly at the train station in Düsseldorf. The borders are closed to love, my love, our holding each other forbidden, and I can't find my way to you. Not because the world these days has been struck by a pandemic or by the 2-meter rule, but simply because with or without pandemic or lockdown, you don't want me anymore. How unfortunate.
Nana-Tee. Wir haben nie Nana-Tee getrunken zusammen. Insgesamt betrachtet haben wir viel zu wenig getanzt. Wir sind nie Rad gefahren zusammen. Insgesamt betrachtet habe ich dir viel zu wenig die Nase zugehalten, um zu hören, wie du klingst beim Sprechen. Wir haben uns viel zu wenig geküsst auf Straßen, aber ab wann küsst es sich schon genug, wenn man einander liebt? Seit letztem Jahr rauche ich nicht mehr. Seit vielen Jahren bin ich Vegetarierin und esse keine Eier. Ich habe eine Pandemie ohne dich überlebt, schreckliche Naturkatastrophen und rassistische Terroranschläge. Ich habe dich ohne dich überlebt und bin dennoch bei Verstand geblieben. Im Sommer lackiere ich mir die Nägel fröhlich rot, im Herbst blau-schwarz. Vieles bleibt gleich beim Menschen. Ich lache immer noch gerne und das laut. Ich schäume über vor Liebe zu allem, was Leben in sich trägt, was kein Leben in sich trägt. Und ich will überall Liebe hinstreuen, wohin ich auch den Fuß setze, wohin ich auch nie hinkomme. Ich könnte die ganze Welt umarmen und will immerzu alles Leben vor jedem Übel beschützen. Geradezu nichts davon gelingt. Wir haben nie Nana-Tee getrunken zusammen und ich weiß, wir werden es nie nachholen.
Moroccan mint tea. We never drank Moroccan mint tea together, and on the whole, we didn't dance enough. We never went cycling together. On the whole, I didn't pinch your nose enough to hear what you sounded like when you talked. We didn't kiss each other enough on the streets. But when is kissing ever enough when you love each other? I haven't smoked since last year. I've been vegetarian for many years and don't eat eggs. I have survived a pandemic without you, catastrophic natural disasters and racist terror attacks. I have survived you without you and nevertheless have stayed sane. In the summer, I paint my nails merry red, in autumn blue-black. Many things stay the same with people. I still love to laugh loudly. I overflow with love for everything that carries life inside it, that carries no life inside it. And I want to sow love wherever I tread, wherever I'll never go. I take the whole world in my arms and always want to keep life from harm. Next to nothing of this succeeds. We never drank Moroccan mint tea together, and I know we'll never make it up now.
Martin, from the poem möglicherweise ganz und gar. I will read a little part, but please read the every part from this poem, okay?
Okay.
Möglicherweise ganz und gar. Vielleicht ist Heimat eine Zeile Kurt Cobain, ein Vers Attila Ilhan, eine tausendjährige Sehnsucht ergraut das Haar, der Regenduft auf dem Ackerland, ein Blick aus dem Fenster schwarz-weiß, ein furchen Weg mit Laub am Herbsttag oder Onkel Jemil mit Wollmütze, wenn er lacht. Vielleicht ist Heimat die Sternschnuppe aus Lorette de Mar, diese eine Millisekunde. Oder die Republik Adigea, ist die Stadtbibliothek Offenbach mit Ernst Buchholz darin, oder der Haustürschlüssel ausgehändigt dem Exilanten. I will stop here.
Okay. Possibly, well and truly. Perhaps home is a line of Kurt Cobain, a verse of Attila Ilhan, 1,000-year-old longing, greying hair, the smell of rain on fields, the view from a window, black and white, a rutted path with leaves on an autumn day, or Uncle Jemil in his woolly hat laughing. Perhaps home is that shooting star from Lorette de Mar, this very millisecond, or the Republic of Adigea, is Offenbach City Library, Ernst Buchholz inside, or the house key handed to the exile. Perhaps home is a deadly serious matter with a walrus moustache, the stretch of pier run barefoot, the fragility of the poppy of our childhood, the Califrix Yakov, the common marmoset or Hello Kitty balloon, even hides itself in candy floss. Perhaps home is a nomad with tukumbut, rests here and there, or a Mickey Mouse shirt and shoelaces of the Baltic. Hair woven into a plait is a shattered glass on which you step, that unexpected ache in the chest. Perhaps home is falling into your bed after a night out, still wearing jeans and trainers and holding it there. Is a couple dancing, forgetting themselves in the tango, the sight of two white-brown horses, sometimes Frankfurt Airport Hall B, or simply Fuzia's voice. Perhaps home is the square root of 8, or a thing with a trunk and cinnamon on top, is a chameleon blending in. Perhaps, though, it's Frau Grün from the ground floor, mithering about everyone. Perhaps. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I love the fact you got mithering into your translation, Martin, as a fellow Northerner. Wonderful. Okay, the next person really doesn't need much introduction, to use a cliche, for readers of modern poetry and translation. It's David Constantine, who is a poet, translator, and novelist, and of course was a wonderful editor of modern poetry and translation itself for many years. And last year he was awarded the Queen's Gold Medal for Poetry, which is rather magnificent and impressive. It's an absolute honour to have him here at the launch for this issue, and he's going to be he's got some beautiful poems in the issue, which are translations from the Greek anthology done during lockdown, and with a kind of they feel suddenly so relevant. I think they're absolutely beautiful. So David, would you perhaps begin by reading one of those for us? You okay, David? Can you unmute yourself? Brilliant.
Yeah, good. Thank you very much, Claire, and thank you all readers. It's a very great pleasure to be on this occasion, one I'm not quite used to yet, although I've done several. the Greek anthology, that's one volume of the 5 in the blurb edition. An anthology in Greek means a garland of flowers, and that's how they understood it. It was composed put together over 1,500 years, about 300 poets, and about 4,000 poems in all. So it's a total treasury. You can stay with it forever, really. And I have now for, as I told Claire earlier, for just about half a century. It seemed a good thing to offer poems from for this pandemic issue because they were by no means perfect in the 5th century BC. The anthology runs through from the 5th or 6th century BC right into Byzantine times. And clearly they did, in a sense, what harm they could to their environment, given the technology. But also they were held back by a strong sense of what one never does. Or if one did it, then the repercussions were frightful and usually immediate. And I think that's what we've lost, a sense of there are no things that we won't do, or there's nothing that we won't actually do if we feel like it. Another thing about the lockdown, as everybody knows, is that when all the traffic stopped early in the mornings, it was a spring, then you heard birdsong again. There were no airplanes in the sky, and that's a kind of recovery of a sense of what it idyllically, ideally, perhaps was like, and what we would like it to be like again. Today's a hopeful day in a sense, since we don't have Trump now, we have another president who's actually quite keen on the idea of saving the planet. I'll read, first of all, I'll read chiefly actually from this, this really admirable issue. This is a poem written by a man called Tumnes in the 3rd century BC. And it has the mysterious first line. It's about an unknown bird called Eleus. I should say that all the poems that I'll read derive from the Greek anthology and are more or less close to it. And in some are entirely, it uses them simply as a starting point. This one touched me a great deal in the Greek. On an unknown bird called Eleus. He writes of the loss of a bird called Eleus. The Graces nurtured her, and like the halcyon singing, she made a calm around her in the sea. She had sweet breath. She loved the light of the sun. He mourns the departure of a gentleness that we can't even put a name to, and no one supposes she would have tarried long with us. The next one is anonymous, and lots of them are anonymous in the book, and this is a fairly free rendering of it. I had in mind actually my father-in-law, who was a very great gardener, and also in many respects resembled one or other of the most unrespectable country gods, little gods. This is called Prayer for Aminticus, a gardener. Mother Earth, remembering how he labored for you, take the old man Aminticus into your lap. He planted many ever-leafing olives in you, and with the vines of Bacchus made you splendid. For your thirst and for the music, he channeled clear water over you. He raised your oats and barley, pot herbs, the figs, the apples, the luscious peaches, so that you would look your best under the sun, and the heavens would pause over you in delighted contemplation. So for his skills and courtesies, beloved earth, lie now gently on him, who never stamped or marched on you, never burdened you with sloth, nor disfigured you for lucre, but loved the curving line and honored the contours. Cover this local man sweetly, and wreathe in spring his grey head with your flowers. A lot of the epigrams in the anthology are sepulchral, that is to say they're to be imagined adorning a particular sepulchre, and not just of human beings, but a great number of them are for birds and animals and fish. The Greeks throughout had a particular love of the dolphin. If they found the corpse of a dolphin washed up on the beach, they would mound stones over it so the rats wouldn't get at it. And in the anthology, you have epigrams commemorating this creature, the dolphin. This is more a poem out of my own, out of such a respect and love of this creature. We started going to Greece in 1980, and over many years, the number of dolphins you see in the Aegean has diminished now to a part of the Eastern Sea there. Dolphin. She flung up here on the dirty tide line. Those are bloody holes that were her eyes, and that encrusted spattering of white is where the gulls perched, hacking at them, and the rest of her. Another subtracted from the cheerful company of creatures who seemed once to love humanity and surfaced, smiling, snorting, leaped and played around our prows that once were dolphin-eyed. With them, warm blood in common, we had access to the ancient depths, the loss, the loss. She lies now stranded under the sun and moon, eyeless, ripped to the bone, not fit to be seen among our trash that will live forever. Come soon, springtide, recover what's left of her. Poems of mine which derive directly from the format that many people have chosen in which to translate the anthology, including particularly my model, Brecht, quatrains that rhyme. Albatross chick. Opened, this babe's full stomach looks like a trove of bright things stowed away for an afterlife. What we cast on the waters is not the food of love. Nothing will come of us for you, but grief. Another one in that mode is ghost gear. Ghost gear is the name given to fishing nets that are cast off from the fishing boats, either deliberately or simply lost, and they drift and creatures catch in them. Ghost gear. Ghost gear drifts. Nobody owns it now. Who owned it last, lost it, or set it free, to float a while under the sun and drift below, and live forever where it doesn't belong to be. And graceful creatures who are local there materialize in it and can't get free, but tangle more. They hang in the ghost gear, drift and struggle, and will not die quickly. And I'll finish with two that this is written by a poet called Adeus of Macedonia, early 4th century BC. When his labouring ox was worn out by old age and the furrows, Alcon, reverencing him for his service, led him not to the slaughter, but to a meadow of deep grass. There, how this fellow creature, when Alcon strolls out to visit him at the hour of shadows, in grateful delight, lifts up his head and bellows. And facing that, the poem, which I put together out of two poets writing about the same subject, the death of Orpheus. Orpheus, as you know, with the power of his singing, could bring the animals around him to listen, and even bring trees and stones around him to listen. The death of Orpheus, son of Calliope. You dead, we have nobody now for a go-between, none the shy forest animals will trust and come to for music. We shall not see them close and enchanted ever again, nor will the oaks quietly uproot and like small children make a circle around the lyre's soft-spoken center. The inner life of rocks, the dance of their atoms is lost to us. And hark at the winds, already deafening. Hail will smash our efforts at nurture. Snow settle in deep. And the sea, tide after tide, will be higher than our houses. The elements have turned vengeful. They have lost a friend. They assume we killed you. The closest, most necessary immortals, let into your secrets, into their secrets, they watched and listened with pleasure and with admiration while you fashioned verse in our mother tongue into native meters, the better to be got by heart. The links are undoing. Already, very few of us remember how they fit. And I'll finish with a poem by a woman called Anite, one of the few female poets who have survived in any number, actually, along with Sappho. Clearly a very great writer, writing in the 3rd century BC. And this is a typical poem by her. Come here, under the leafing canopy of the laurel. Sit by the spring and drink. The water is sweet. You are tired from laboring in the summer heat. Rest now. The touch of cooling Zephyrus is gentle. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, David. Thank you. Thank you for being here at this launch. That was just lovely. I love that last poem, particularly. Okay. Now for our final pair. I've got probably one swig of margarita left, so a swig and a sip. Our final pair are Simone Atangana Bekono, who we published in MPT a couple of years ago, and I'm a very, very big fan of her work. She's a poet and novelist who's won many prestigious Dutch prizes for her poetry debut, How the First Sparks Became Visible, which is now out in the UK with Emma Press. And I would highly recommend that if you haven't already got a copy. And we're also very pleased to feature her in this issue in conversation with Jay Bernard. And it's a really, really interesting conversation. And we're also welcoming tonight her translator, David Colmer, who has won many translation prizes, including the Penn Translation Prize for his body of work and the David Reed Poetry Translation Prize 4 times, I believe. And David is also an old friend of MPT who's written for us, translated for us many times. So a great final pair. I'm looking forward to this. Please read.
We're going to read 3 poems. And I'm going to start. Ik ben in een bos geboren. Ik ben geboren en er werd een lamp op mij gericht. Op het geboortedoek achter mij verscheen mijn silhouet. Mijn silhouet deed haar mond open. Ze zei, ik besta omdat jouw lichaam bestaat. Kronos die zijn kinderen verorberde, bloeddorstig als Goya hem afbeelde op doek met olie. Een onherkenbaar geworden lichaam, gulzig en chaotisch, zonder wortels in de aarde. Daar moest ik het mee doen. Ik hoorde geheig en gelach, concrete, specifieke geluiden. Mijn silhouet was een silhouet zonder specifieke kenmerken. Mijn silhouet was op een onbegrijpelijke manier van mij. Zij handelde voor mij. Zij was er alleen als ik keek. Zij bestond alleen op het doek. Concrete, specifieke geluiden. Ik wilde opgenomen worden in een systeem van vinkjes en kruisjes. Ik wilde virtueel, seksueel en van politiek ondaar genot ingesloten worden, met mijn kin op de rand van het bureau op de achterbank van een Tesla, uit het keuzemenu verwijderd worden. Ja, ingesloten worden.
Number 1. I was born in Am I there? Okay. I was born in a forest. I was born and someone trained a light on me. On the birthing cloth behind me, my silhouette appeared. My silhouette opened her mouth and said, I exist because your body exists. Cronus devouring his children, as bloodthirsty as Goya painted him. A body become unrecognizable, greedy and chaotic, not rooted in the earth. This was all I had to go on. I heard panting and laughter, concrete specific sounds. My silhouette was a silhouette without specific characteristics. My silhouette was mine in an incomprehensible way. She acted on my behalf. She was only there when I looked. She existed only on the cloth. Concrete specific sounds. I wanted to be incorporated into a system of ticks and crosses. I wanted virtual, sexual, depoliticized pleasure. Inside, with my chin on the edge of the desk, on the back seat of a Tesla, removed from the menu. Yes, inside. Four. The choir's song sticks to the feet of the feverishly dancing priest. The house coils around him, his legs tense. All other heads in the room are bowed. All black people identify with broken people. All black people identify with abandoned people. All black people are criminal. In Hong Kong, ignore the Mongkok Express, the two people who pull you away from the sparkling rails, the tram line that swallows branches as it climbs the mountain, thin air between Chinese mountains and plane wings, the flight against the Earth's rotation. Ignore the roof of the building that whispers, come closer to the edge that whispers, look down, the street that beckons with 1,000 wrists stuck to car bumpers, thin fingers of light curling round your ribs to pull you down, and a soft whisper.
4. Gezang van het koor kleeft aan de voeten van de priester. Hij is koortsachtig aan het dansen, het huis wikkelt zich om hem heen, zijn benen verkrampen. Alle andere hoofden in de ruimte zijn gebogen. Alle zwarte mensen identificeren zich met gebroken mensen. Alle zwarte mensen identificeren zich met verlaten mensen. Alle zwarte mensen zijn crimineel. Negeer de sneltrein in Hongkong richting Mongkok. De 2 mensen die je van de vonkende rails wegtrekken. De tramlijn die bergopwaarts gaat en takken opslokt. IJle lucht tussen Chinese bergen en vliegtuigvleugels. De reis tegen de rotatie van de aarde in. Negeer het dak van het gebouw dat naar je fluistert dat je dichter bij de rand moet gaan staan. De rand die fluistert dat je over die rand moet kijken. De straat die wenkt met 1000 polsen geplakt op autobumpers. Dunne vingers van licht die zich om je ribben krullen om je naar beneden te trekken en een zacht gefluister.
All people don't exist. All black people identify with abandoned people, and all black people don't exist. Ignore the enormous swollen blisters on your belly, in the back of the car, screaming with pain on your way back to Holland, because being in transit, relocating your soul, is accepting that temporarily you do not exist, and then the pain can't either. Slowly the body bloats and grows heavier. Forget the first time you realize you can no longer walk from the sofa to the toilet, the 20 lost pounds after 6 months in bed, the Olympic champion figure skater who veers across your screen while you piss in a pot.
Alle mensen bestaan niet. Alle zwarte mensen identificeren zich met verlaten mensen en alle zwarte mensen bestaan niet. Negeer de enorme strakstaande blaren op je buik, achter in de auto, krijsend van de pijn op weg terug naar Nederland, want onderweg zijn, je ziel verplaatsen, is accepteren dat je tijdelijk niet bestaat en dus bestaat de pijn ook niet. Het lichaam zwelt langzaam op en wordt zwaarder. Vergeet de eerste keer dat je beseft dat je niet meer van de bank naar de wc kan lopen. De 10 verdwenen kilo's na een half jaar op bed. De Olympisch kampioen figuurschaatsen die over je beeldscherm zwabbert terwijl je in een poop plast.
Because every form of self-hatred is complex and individual, all black people do not exist. All black people is a combination of words that starts at your teeth and extends like stretched latex over your whole body until you are broken and gasping on the floor, stripped of every form of humanity. It is only a thin layer, but it makes me unrecognizable, unlivable, ever rounder and heavier, a bucket full of water in the middle of a swimming pool. So forget 2005, forget the cars in Naples and the driver's fangs, the Somali handbag salesman in Rome who appeared, then disappeared again, the musician in Montpellier who seemed to smell of the village where your father was born, the old woman in the supermarket who reached across your mother's chest to pinch your cheek hard.
Want elke vorm van zelfhaat is complex en individueel. Alle zwarte mensen bestaan niet. Alle zwarte mensen is een combinatie van woorden die bij je tanden begint en zich als rekbare latex langzaam over je lichaam trekt tot het ademloos en krakend op de grond ligt, ontdaan van iedere vorm van menselijkheid. Het is een dunne laag, maar hij maakt mij onherkenbaar, onleefbaar, steeds boller en zwaarder, een volle emmer water in het midden van een zwembad. Dus vergeet heel 2005. Vergeet de auto's in Napels en de slagtanden van hun bestuurders. De Somalische tassenverkoper in Rome die verscheen en weer verdween. De muzikant in Montpellier die naar het geboortedorp van je vader leek te ruiken. De vrouw in de supermarkt die zich langs je moeders borst boog en hard in je wang kneep.
Forget the pressure of this earthly existence on your chest at 4 in the morning, sweating from an inexplicable terror while minutes crawl over your body like spiders. All black people is a lost art, rarely mourned, an insoluble conflict. I have to spend 3 hours sitting in a wheelchair, and even that is exhausting. All black people sit on benches, and that is exhausting. All black people watch the Oscars in bed. Black people sit in the metro. Black people make their bodies smaller with big hair and tiny phones, and that is exhausting. The city is a strain. The village is a conflict zone. The natural splendor, a reflection in my rearview mirror. Are we already on holiday? I asked. Why didn't you answer? All black people have gone to the seaside on holiday. Thumbs on the beach. And even that is exhausting.
Vergeet de druk van het aardse leven op je borstkas om 4 uur 's ochtends, zwetend van een onherleidbare angst terwijl minuten als spinnen over je lichaam kruipen. Alle zwarte mensen is een vergane kunstvorm waar slechts enkele naar terug verlangen, een onoplosbaar conflict. Ik moet 3 uur lang in een rolstoel zitten en zelfs dat is vermoeiend. Alle zwarte mensen zitten op een bankje en dat is vermoeiend. Alle zwarte mensen kijken in bed naar de Oscars. Zwarte mensen zitten in de metro. Zwarte mensen maken hun lichamen kleiner met groot haar en kleine telefoons. En dat is vermoeiend. De stad vergt inspanning. Het dorp is een conflictgebied. De wijdse natuur een reflectie in mijn achteruitkijkspiegel. Zijn we al op vakantie, vroeg ik. Waarom heb je me geen antwoord gegeven? Alle zwarte mensen zitten aan zee op vakantie, hun kont in het zand. En zelfs dat is vermoeiend.
6. You mustn't think anything black. Don't let your brain go that way. I think of black 1,000 times a day and try to draw the word out of me. My conscience says I mustn't think about it. Ignore everything that makes you doubt. I think of black 1,000 times a day. The footballer from Guadeloupe loves Dutch food. He says, nasi goreng, roti, pea soup. I am a country, and a country that matters. And no, I am not on holiday. That plane keeps on getting pushed back. There is no hostess to ask how long this is going to take, how much longer I have to listen to the lotto ads. I am stuck between ground and space, dead space, an unfathomable situation, a door that leads nowhere but still opens, non-stop.
6. Je mag niet zwarts denken. Die afslag niet nemen met je brein. Ik denk 1000 keer per dag aan zwart en probeer het woord uit mij te trekken. Mijn geweten zegt dat ik niet na mag denken. Negeer alles wat je doet twijfelen. Ik denk 1000 keer per dag aan zwart. De voetballer uit Guadeloupe houdt van Nederlands eten. Hij zegt nasi goreng, roti, erwtensoep. Ik ben een land. En een land dat ertoe doet. En nee, ik ben niet op vakantie. Dat vliegtuig komt niet van de grond. Er is geen stewardess aan wie je kan vragen hoe lang dit nog moet duren. Hoe lang ik nog moet luisteren naar de lotto-reclames. Ik zit vast tussen ruimte en grond. Een dode ruimte. Een onbevattelijke situatie. Een deur die nergens toe leidt, maar wel werkelijk constant opengaat. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Wonderful, absolutely wonderful. That was such a powerful sequence. Thank you very, very much, Simona and David, for sharing those with us. We've just got kind of 10 minutes for some questions. We've not got absolutely loads of time. I think our digital editor is going to tell me if there are any in the chat. Are there any questions in the chat, or would anyone like to put any questions in the chat now? I'm just going to have a little look. Okay, well, I'm going to start one while we're waiting to see if anyone else has got any, which is just on a basic level, just a simple question, really. How has the pandemic kind of affected you as a writer? And that could be that you've not been able to write at all, or it could be that you've found it very inspiring. I'd be interested to hear. So Safiye, maybe to start, you seem to have written quite a lot. So that was a new sequence. If you want to speak in German, and then Martin could translate a little bit if it was short answers. Martin, do you want to unmute yourself as well? Sorry, Martin.
Now. Martin, wenn das Mikro bei dir an ist, dann bitte ich, es dauert immer eine Weile, habe ich gemerkt, um eine kurze Zusammenfassung der Frage. He cannot read now. I think Ed have to do something for this, that he can talk. The microphone
Ed, could you turn Martin's microphone on?
Please.
Please, sorry, yeah, you reminded me to be polite to Ed. Thank you, Safiye. Yes, I did try to say. There you are.
So, die Clare hat gefragt, inwiefern sich während der Pandemie sich das Schreiben sich verändert hat. Und sie hat bemerkt, dass du ziemlich viel geschrieben hast. Also die 3 Gedichte waren ja alle, die 3, die wir waren ja neu. Zum Beispiel.
Tatsächlich passt das Thema, das wir haben von dieser Lesung, wunderbar zu meinem Buch, das hoffentlich ab August erscheint. Das sage ich hiermit auch zum ersten Mal.
So, actually, the theme of the issue fits the new book that's coming out, which in August, which is the first time she's announced that.
Weil ich in dieser Zeit sehr viel geschrieben habe. Wir schreiben ja alle über das, was uns bewegt, womit wir uns auskennen. Und das war für mich wie für uns alle eben die Pandemie.
So because we write about what's kind of close to us and what moves us, and of course for her, like everyone, it was the pandemic.
Und es ist aber halt nicht nur Corona-Pandemie als Pandemie, sondern ich habe mich gefragt, was ist noch eine Pandemie für uns alle überall auf der Welt? Und da zählt für mich, Simone hat es im Gedicht auch schön angesprochen, Rassismus dazu. Für mich zählen Frauenrechte dazu, aber auch immer wieder Liebe, was auch eine Art von Pandemie ist.
So, so the thinking about pandemic wasn't just limited to coronavirus, but Safiye was thinking what other kind of pandemics there are, and as Simona addressed in her poem, they included for Safiye racism, but also women's rights, and also love as a kind of pandemic.
Wonderful. Yeah. Simone, how about you? How has it affected your writing life this last year?
Yeah, I think it's weirdly made me more, how should I say it? I think on the one hand, despite the fact that it was quite devastating, obviously, to everybody, I really also realized that because of this hectic lifestyle that I guess I and a lot of other people were living, it actually really, that lifestyle actually really tempered my inspiration and my I guess productivity, which is an awful word. But it did make me turn a little bit more inward, and it gave me some time to rethink and reread a lot of stuff. And it did make me a little bit more conscious about my practice as a writer. And I always feel a little bit guilty about it, because it's also like, really, did I really need a pandemic to kind of come to all these conclusions about my writing? But the quiet really did help. But on the other hand, it's been, I guess, that when it comes to living situations and being able to also connect with readers and you know, have inspiring talks with people, which was also, of course, a very big part of your practice. That has really not been a part of my life, and yeah, I really miss it. I mean, in the UK, you guys are slowly starting to go back to the new normal, as they like to say it, but in the Netherlands, that's definitely not the case.
I think it's a long time to have poetry readings, though. It's
yeah.
just outdoor events, and no one's got the money to ensure poetry readings.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, that's also something that I think about. Like, it's such a delicate practice, I guess, writing. And then with these times, you can really see how vulnerable institutions and writers and artists are. So yeah.
Thank you. And David, you're always so prolific anyway. Don't tell me it's made you more prolific. I haven't written a poem all year. Do you want to unmute yourself, David? If that's possible. How's your writing life? That's good. How's your writing life been this year then?
Well, this year and last, what I said by way of introduction to those poems, then it's not a new anthology to me. As I say, I've been translating it. I got into it, first of all, through Brecht, who was, his son gave him a copy of the, and a selection from the Greek anthology. And he derived from that, what he loved about it was the so-ness of the things, the actual there-ness of everything that the Greeks wrote about, in a very concrete fashion. And Brecht derived this kind of four-line, the quatrain, the rhyming quatrain, and in his War Primer, it was published after his death. It's a book of photographs, and underneath the photograph then is a quatrain explaining it or amplifying it. And I've never left Brecht. I went back to Brecht in lockdown as well. But what I said at the outset was that there was this peculiar stop. There was a halt in ordinary life, which was catastrophic for many people and deadly, obviously. But it did have the effect of forcing you to stop. And lockdown meant that. We were very lucky, not very lucky. We're in a place where we could walk from our house can walk from our house into 2 or 3 parks. And also a great pleasure was that the golf course had to close and play golf on it. So there was a near immediate recovery of the golf course as public land and a mass trespass onto that land by the entire neighborhood, so that we're picnicking in the bunkers and children were making sand pies in the bunkers. And there's a curious sense in which that felt, and I don't see why I shouldn't use the word idyllic. It's like the restoration of a simplicity of being out, allowed out in certain places, which those who had that access were very grateful for. The pandemic seems to have come about by, or if it's correct to say, from that frightful market in China where, and that's a particular instance of abuse, because it's pandemics, these dreadful viruses very often spring from species to species, and that means that we're dealing with other species in a way that we shouldn't be. When I said earlier about this Greek sense of there are things you must not do, and if you do them, you will immediately pay for them in ways which are unbelievably drastic. Well, we know that now, faced up to that now, or we are facing up to it. So there's an enormously serious implication in what is still happening to us, and that combined with the enforced space and the enforced halt, I think it's not always pleasant by any means, and sometimes it's deeply depressing, but it is a zone in which one needs to take stock. And it doesn't mean to say you have to write about your own particular circumstances, but it's a zone in which a different sort of thinking, feeling, relationship with the outside world might possibly come about. And heaven knows we are at the point where if we don't mend our ways, we've had it. I mean, as a species, we've had it. And it needs reiterating, and I'll say it now, that from any point of view except our own, Homo sapiens is an evolutionary disaster. And that's saying an awful lot. And we need in some way to reduce the harm that as a species we do. And that's just become ever more apparent. And what that offers is the possibility of a different relationship with the world around us, a greater sense of the equality, the interconnectedness of all things. And I think that was a common realization.
Thank you, David. That's so beautifully put. We've got a question from the audience, so I'm just going to say that it's from Kate. This is really interesting to me as the editor of this issue. Is it arguable that everything poets have written since March 2020 is by definition pandemic poetry, or is it possible to disentangle writing from the pandemic? Certainly from this issue, I was looking for a hint, whether it was in the poem itself or in the translation, that the pandemic had made people write the poem or do the translation slightly differently than they would have done before, I think. Because otherwise anyone could have just sent me anything, couldn't they? How would I have known? But you know, I wasn't looking. I got sent a lot of poems that were very on the nose, very direct, kind of lyrical eye poems where the speaker is in their flat or staring out their window or very bored, or, you know, looking at the view, drinking coffee. And actually some of those were very, very moving, but there were a lot of those. So I was looking for stuff that approached it from slightly different angles. And I really liked those translations like David's of old texts, but looking at them from in a slightly, you felt coming at them in a slightly new way because of lockdown. And I really like poems that just, there's a great poem about handshakes, or things that just saw things that seem familiar to us with slightly new eyes, was something that I was looking for. But would anyone else like to chip in, any of our poets or translators? Do you think anything written after March 2020 is pandemic? Well, it's pandemic era poetry, isn't it? But I suppose you could aim to write poems that had, I see a lot of novelists talking about this, actually. I see a lot of novelists saying that they want to write novels that have absolutely no trace of the pandemic in them whatsoever, because people don't want to hear about it, you know. How do you feel? Simone, have you addressed the pandemic directly, do you think? I felt there were hints of it in that work, but I wasn't sure if that was new work or.
This is old work, so this has nothing to do with the pandemic. But I do think, like, I think it's an interesting question, because what you were also saying with the poems that you're looking for to then publish in the anthology, in the magazine, is that you start to look for something that's like hidden beneath the surface, maybe that kind of connects to the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And I really do think, like, I finished my novel in the early months of the pandemic, and my novel takes place in a juvenile detention center, which was like quite strange, because then this kind of feeling of being closed off and not being able to go outside and being very limited was immediately linked to the situation that we were all in worldwide. So I think that that's more something that I find really interesting about what is being written during the pandemic or finished during the pandemic, or that we will be writing about now. I think that what we feel and how we connect with the world, and the things that we kind of learn also in horrible ways through the pandemic, I think that is something that you will be, that you catch that in different texts in different ways, even texts that are not specifically or directly about the pandemic. And I think that's a really interesting way of engaging with it. I think that, you know, what you were also talking about, like, that there are a lot of novelists that say, like, oh, I don't want to write about the pandemic at all. I completely understand that, because you're just sick of it in a way, I guess. But I do think that it will be something that maybe will return later as a theme, maybe in certain books. But I can also totally, like, for me personally, it felt like I don't also want to let that seep into my writing, because it's already everywhere around me, but you can't really escape it. Sense of alienation, of missing, you know, loved ones, or distance, is a very, I think, a poetic theme in general. So.
Thank you. Okay, I don't think we've got any further questions, so I'm going to wrap up there, as we've gone slightly over our time. But thank you so much, everyone who's joined us. Safiye Can, Martin Kratz, David Constantine, Simone Atangana Bekono, and David Colmer. Buy all their books. I get a copy of the new issue. It's easier for me. I do actually have a copy, but it just looks like I'm holding the backdrop. Buy a copy of the new issue. Thank you, everyone, for your support, not just attending this event tonight, but your support of the magazine during this weird and difficult year. And once again, thank you to the European Cultural Foundation for supporting this launch. Cheers, everyone, and hope to see you again soon.